evening, and I'm so happy to see you. We're moving right along. This is just crazy. I never thought about that balloon. I just assumed balloons were something that happened more recent, but apparently they were around in the 1940s. I mean, who knew, right? We are going to get started in just a second. Here is my shout out. Is my banana. Hello. I can't hear you. I have a banana in my ear. This is my banana. It's my shout out. Who doesn't love a good banana? And this is another jar of peanut butter. This is my product placement. I bought it mainly because it's a glass jar. I needed a glass jar. And the only ingredient is peanuts with a little salt, because the other kind of peanut butter is bad for you. It isn't really peanut butter, but this is really peanut butter. So I got the glass jar I needed and the peanut butter that I love. If you cut me open, peanut butter would ooze out. Well, let's get on with this story, because this is just killing me. It's so crazy. It's so good. We are up to a place called Summary. When the claims offered by UFO theorists to prove that an extraterrestrial spaceship crew crashed and were recovered by the U.S. Air Force are compared to documented Air Force activities, it is reasonable to conclude with a high degree of certainty that the two crashes were actually descriptions of a launch or recovery of high-altitude balloon and anthropomorphic dummies. This conclusion was based on the remarkable similarities and independent corroboration between the witnesses who described both of the crash sites. Statements such as they was using dummies in those damn things. Good morning, Caballero. Good morning. Damn things, and characterization of the crash vehicle. Yes, good morning. Of the crash vehicle, based on remarkable similarities and independent corroboration between the witnesses who described both of the crash sites. Statements such as they was using dummies in those damn things. Yes, good to see you. And the characterization of the crashed vehicle as I thought it was a blimp are two of the many similarities. Très bien, merci. The extensive detailed descriptions provided by the witnesses, too numerous to be coincidental, were of the equipment, vehicles, procedures, and personnel of the Air Force research organizations who conducted the scientific experiments High Dive and Excelsior. Yes. Though it is clear anthropomorphic dummies were responsible for these accounts, the specific locations of the events described was difficult. It is not impossible to determine, since the witnesses were not specific. A witness to the crash site north of Roswell, Mr. James Ragsdale, was not certain of the actual location as evidenced by a change in his sworn testimony that moved the site many miles from its original location. However, since Ragsdale reportedly lived or worked in the Roswell, Artesia, and Carlsbad, New Mexico areas during the period when the dummies were used, it is likely he described one or more of the 9 documented dummy recoveries in areas near there. Reports of the other crash site, allegedly 175 miles northwest of Roswell on the San Augustine Plains, is likely based on descriptions of more than one launch and recovery of anthropomorphic dummies. Since one witness, Gerald Anderson, described procedures consistent with the launch and recovery of high-altitude balloons, it is likely that he witnessed both of these activities, with at least one that included an anthropomorphic dummy payload. The 2 second-hand witnesses to this crash, Vern Malteus and Alice Knight, could have related descriptions from any of the dummy launch or landing sites. However, Malteus and Knight repeatedly described the impact location of the flying saucer as the San Augustine Plains. One possible explanation is that the witnesses in the 30 or more years since they were told the story by the original eyewitnesses, Mr. Barney Barnett, a soil conservation engineer who reportedly traveled extensively throughout New Mexico, may have confused San Augustine Plains with San Augustine Pass or San Augustine Peak, an area in San Augustine Mountains of New Mexico. These areas are just outside the boundary of the White Sands Missile Range and the adjacent Jornada Test Range. Numerous anthropomorphic dummy balloon flights terminated and were recovered in this area. Furthermore, if the civilians witnessed dummy landings on either the White Sands Missile Range or the Jornada Test Range, both test areas and restricted U.S. government reservations, this explanation why they have been told to leave the landing site. In the popular Roswell scenarios, witnesses were allegedly instructed by military personnel to leave the area because they witnessed something of a highly classified nature. This would be unlikely since the witnesses described projects that utilize anthropomorphic dummies which were unclassified. It is likely, however, that if the witnesses ventured into one of these ranges, they were instructed to leave, not because of classified activities, but for their own safety. These conclusions were supported by official files, technical reports, extensive photographic documentation, and the recollections of numerous former and retired Air Force members and civilian employees who conducted projects High Dive and Excelsior. The descriptions examined here, provided by UFO theorists themselves, were so remarkably and redundantly similar to these Air Force projects that only reasonable conclusion can be that the witnesses described these activities. These many similarities are summarized in Table 1.1. The next section will examine the accounts of aliens at the hospital at Roswell Army Airfield, as previously stated, due to the lack of general or detailed similarities with testimony of the two rural crash sites. The hospital account was determined not to be associated with these reports. Oh goodness, so we have that. We have several pages of tables, so we won't read those. So hello, good to see you, yes. Let's see. Yes, Shabir, good to see you. Happy to see you. Welcome aboard, my dear friend. You are my friend, yes. Now we are reading Section 2, Reports of Bodies at the Roswell Air Force Base Hospital. This section examines the remaining portion of the Roswell incident claims, the reports of bodies at the Roswell Air Force Hospital. Examinations of the various crash saucer scenarios revealed references to Roswell Air Force Hospital appeared in virtually all of them. Most of these were based on the account of one individual, W. Glenn Dennis. His undocumented and uncorroborated recollections, reportedly first related in 1989, over 42 years after the alleged Roswell incident, are based on activities he allegedly encountered as a mortician providing contract services to the Roswell Air Force Hospital. Dennis's recollections have, in turn, been interpreted by UFO theorists as evidence that the U.S. Army Air Forces recovered alien bodies and autopsied them at the Roswell Air Force Hospital in July of 1947. Dennis has been described as the star witness and his claims as the most credible of the Roswell incident. This even though his most sensational assertions were not based on his own experiences, but on information allegedly related to him by unidentified mystery witnesses. The mystery witnesses were allegedly an Army Air Force's nurse and a pediatrician, both assigned to the Roswell Air Force Hospital in 1947. To casual observers, this account, which contains references to actual U.S. Army Air Forces and U.S. Air Force personnel and activities, appears to have a ring of authenticity. However, when examined closely by Air Force researchers, the dates and events, the events themselves, and the people described as having participated in them were found to be grossly inaccurate and totally unrelated to the activities of July 1947. The account. The following is a summary of information provided by W. Glenn Dennis, who claimed he was a 22-year-old mortician at the Ballard Funeral Home in Roswell in July 1947, when he alleged these events occurred. On July 7, 1947, Dennis alleged he received a series of phone calls at the Ballard Funeral Home where he worked from the mortuary affairs officer at Roswell Army Airfield. He recalled that the mortuary officer inquired as to the availability of a child-sized caskets and procedures for preserving bodies that had been laying out in the elements. Later that day, he received an emergency ambulance call. The civilian mortuary for which he worked also provided an ambulance service to respond to the site of a minor traffic accident in Roswell. The accident victim was an airman stationed at Roswell Air Force Base, and Dennis transported the airman to the hospital at the base. As Dennis walked into the hospital, he noticed 3 military box-type ambulances, one or more of which contained what appeared to be wreckage. He described the wreckage as being inscribed with odd markings or symbols in bluish and purplish in color. He recalled that some of this wreckage was resting against the inside wall of the rear compartment of the ambulance, and 2 pieces of it looked kind of like a bottom of a canoe. He described other wreckage on the floor of the ambulance as being all sharp, and as best he could tell was like broken glass. He also recalled observing military policemen standing at the back of these 2 ambulances. When he went inside the hospital, he encountered a military nurse who was assigned there and with whom he previously was acquainted. The nurse looked upset, was covering her mouth with a cloth, and told him that you're going to get in a lot of trouble, and that he should just get out of there. Dennis also stated that he encountered a military doctor who was assigned to the hospital, a pediatrician, with whom he was pretty good friends, but did not speak with at the time. Having seen the wreckage in the rear of the ambulance and believing there had been an accident, he asked another officer in the hospital if there had been a plane crash. The officer, whom Dennis had never seen before, asked him, "Who in the hell are you?" When he responded he was from the funeral home, the officer summoned 2 MPs to escort him from the hospital. However, before Dennis and the 2 MPs had left the hospital, he heard someone say, "We're not through with that SOB, bring him back here." When Dennis turned around, he observed a red-headed captain. In one version of these events, Dennis is quoted as describing this person as a big red-headed colonel who said, "You did not see anything. There was no crash here. You don't go into town making any rumors that you saw anything, that there was any crash. You could get in a lot of trouble." Angry about being called an SOB, Dennis informed the red-headed officer that he was a civilian not under his authority, and that he, the red-headed officer, can't do a damn thing to me. The red-headed officer was alleged to have threatened Dennis by responding, "Oh yes, we can. Somebody will be picking your bones out of the sand. We can do anything to you that we want to." A black sergeant whom Dennis made real good dog food, a black sergeant whom Dennis recalled had accompanied the red-headed officer, allegedly stated he would make real good dog food. Following this exchange, Dennis claimed he was picked up arm in arm and escorted back to his place of business by 2 MPs. The following day, July 8, 1947, Dennis attempted to telephone the nurse he had seen in the hall at the hospital to find out what was going on. He stated that he was unable to reach the nurse, but did reach another nurse, a Captain Wilson, who explained to him that the nurse was trying to contact was not on duty, but Wilson would give her a message to call him. The nurse called Dennis later that same day at the funeral home where he worked and agreed to meet him at the Officers Club at Roswell Air Force Base that afternoon. When the two met, the nurse appeared disturbed and ill. Dennis asked her to explain what was going on. When they met in the hospital the day before, the nurse explained that in the course of her normal duties, she entered an examining room to get some supplies and encountered two doctors whom she did not recognize that supposedly were doing a preliminary autopsy on three very mangled black little bodies. The doctors requested the nurse remain in the room because they needed her assistant. She allegedly explained that there was a terrible odor in the room that made both her and the doctors ill. Due to this terrible odor and inadequate ventilation, the nurse allegedly told Dennis that the autopsies were moved to another facility on the base, and then everything was taken to Wright Field, now Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. The nurse described the little bodies in detail and even provided a diagram. She described little bodies, 3 to 4 feet in length, that had large, flexible heads and concave eyes and noses. After this meeting, Dennis claimed he never saw the nurse again, and he was told she had been shipped out the same afternoon, July 8, 1947, or the next day, July 9, 1947. However, sometime later, Dennis received a letter from the nurse that indicated she was in London, England. Dennis stated that he tried to respond to the nurse, but his letter was returned stamped, returned to sender, and deceased. After receiving this letter, he inquired at the base about the nurse and was told by Captain Wilson that she didn't know where the nurse was, but there was rumors that she and several other nurses had been killed in a plane crash while on a training mission. Some years later, Dennis stated that he visited the unidentified military pediatrician he had seen at the hospital. The pediatrician had since left the military and set up practice in Farmington, New Mexico. Dennis said he and the pediatrician discussed the incident of years past, but was stopped short when the pediatrician told him that he was consulted regarding this incident, but that it was completely out of his field of medicine. That ended the discussion. Based on this account, UFO theorists have presented the following assertions. Dennis, the missing nurse, and the unidentified pediatrician inadvertently stumbled onto the highly classified autopsies of alien bodies at Roswell Air Force Base Hospital in July of 1947. The two mysterious doctors at the hospital were sent to Roswell Air Force Base for a higher headquarters to conduct the autopsies, after which the bodies were transported to what is now Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. The bluish, purplish wreckage that looked like the bottom of a canoe in the rear of the ambulance were escape pods from a flying saucer flown by the aliens that crashed in the Roswell area. Dennis was forcibly removed from the hospital and threatened with death by the red-headed officer because he had witnessed some of these activities. The nurse was kidnapped, possibly murdered, and all records that she ever existed were systematically destroyed by government agents, also because she witnessed these activities. As in other accounts examined in this report, the episodes described here became part of the Roswell incident only because the witness claimed they occurred at a very specific time, July 7th through the 9th, 1947. These dates coincide with an actual event, the retrieval of experimental Project Mogul research equipment that was erroneously reported as a flying disc. And the events described here occurred at any other time, years, months, or weeks, or even days before or after July 7th through 9, 1947. They might be considered unusual to an uninformed person, but certainly not part of the Roswell incident. Air Force research revealed that the witness made serious errors in his recollections of events. When his account was compared with official records of the actual events he is believed to have described, extensive inaccuracies were indicated, including a likely error in the date by as much as 12 years. Wow, okay, we are up to section 2.1, the missing nurse and the pediatrician. To illustrate the errors in this account and to identify actual events, the following section will examine the accounts of the missing nurse and the unidentified pediatrician. Both of these persons were allegedly present at the Roswell Air Force Hospital when the events described by the witness occurred. The missing nurse. Dennis recalled that the nurse was quickly and suspiciously shipped out either the same day or the day after he met with her in the Roswell Air Force Officers Club. If this allegation was true, it certainly seemed unusual and verifiable. Therefore, the morning reports, the certified daily personnel counting records required to be kept by all Army Air Forces units at the time, were obtained and reviewed. These reports did not indicate that a nurse or any other person was reassigned on the days alleged July 8th or 9th, 1947. The morning reports of the 427th Army Air Forces Base Unit, Squadron M, the unit that all medical personnel at Roswell were assigned in July 1947, did not indicate a sudden or overseas transfer of a nurse or any other person. Records indicate that one nurse was reassigned on July the 23rd, 1947, over 2 weeks after the purported events described by Dennis. That nurse was transferred by normal personnel rotation procedures at Fort Worth Air Force Base, now Carswell Air Force Base, Texas, where she remained on active duty until March of 1949. In fact, the Squadron M morning reports revealed the strength of the Army Nurse Corps at Roswell Air Force Base for July 1947 was only 5 nurses. Of these 5 nurses, none were transferred overseas or killed in a plane crash, the rumored fate of the missing nurse. The review of the hospital morning reports also indicated that the name of the missing nurse provided by the witness was inaccurate. The witness stated in several interviews that he believed the nurse's name was Naomi Maria Self. A comprehensive search of morning reports and rosters from Roswell Air Force Station Hospital indicated that no person by this name or similar name had ever served there. This finding was supported by a search of personnel records at the National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis, Missouri, a part of the National Archives and Records Administration. The NPRC is a depository for all U.S. military personnel records. The search at NPRC also did not find a record that a person named Naomi Maria Self had ever served in any branch of the U.S. Armed Forces. These findings were consistent with previous efforts of several pro-UFO researchers who have also attempted to locate this nurse or members of her family. They likewise were also unable to confirm her existence. While some UFO theorists continue to allege that this absence of records regarding a nurse by the name is part of a conspiracy to withhold information, the most likely reason for the lack of records is that the name is inaccurate. Even though the name of the nurse is incorrect, it appears that a nurse assigned to the Roswell Air Force Station Hospital in 1947 may have been the basis for the claims. Eileen Mae Fanton was the only nurse of the 5 assigned to Roswell Air Force Base in July of 1947, whose personal circumstances and physical attributes not only resembled those of the missing nurse, but appeared to be nearly an exact match. And here's her picture. And I'll read the bio on her. Missing nurse, First Lieutenant Eileen N. Fanton was assigned to the Roswell Army Airfield Station Hospital from December 26, 1946 until September the 4th, 1947. Fanton, who is deceased, was retired from the U.S. Air Force at the rank of captain on April the 30th, 1955 for a physical disability. In this account, the missing nurse is described as single, real cute, like a small Audrey Hepburn, with short black hair, dark eyes, and olive skin. Lieutenant Fanton was single in 1947, 5 feet 1, weighed 100 pounds, had black hair, dark eyes, and was of Italian descent. Dennis also stated that the nurse was of the Catholic faith and had been strictly raised according to Catholic beliefs. Fanton's personnel record listed her as a Roman Catholic, a graduate of St. Catherine's Academy in Springfield, Kentucky, and as having received her nursing certificate from St. Mary's Elizabeth's Hospital in Louisville, Kentucky. The witness also recalled that the missing nurse was a general nurse at the hospital, and had sent him correspondence at a later date which stated she was in London, England, with a New York APO number, military overseas mailing address, as the return address. Records revealed that Fanton was a first lieutenant, promoted to second lieutenant to first lieutenant in June 1947, and she was classified as a nurse general duty. Records also indicated that of the 5 nurses assigned to Roswell Air Force Base Station Hospital in July 1947, she was the only one that later served a tour of duty in England. Furthermore, she was assigned to the 775 10th U.S. Air Force Hospital APO 240, New York, where she served from June 1952 until April of 1955. The 75 10th USAF hospital was located approximately 45 miles north of London at Wimpole Park, Cambridge, England. An additional similarity between Fanton and the missing nurse is that her personnel record indicated that she quickly departed Roswell, and it is probable that the hospital staff would not provide information concerning her departure. Fanton's unannounced departure from Roswell on September the 4th, 1947, was to be admitted to Brooke General Hospital, Fort Sam, Houston, Texas, for a medical condition. This condition was first diagnosed in January of 1946 and ultimately led to her medical retirement in 1955. Therefore, if someone other than a family member contacted Station Hospital at Roswell Air Force Base and inquired about Fanton, as Dennis stated he did, the staff was simply protecting her privacy as a patient. The staff was not participating in a sinister cover-up of information as alleged by UFO theorists. And now we are reading The Pediatrician. In at least 2 interviews, the witness stated that a pediatrician stationed at the hospital was involved in the events as he described. When asked by an interviewer how he knew the pediatrician was involved, Dennis was quoted as replying, "I know he was involved because I saw him there." Dennis is also quoted as saying that he and the pediatrician, hello, konnichiwa, and good to see you, very good to see you. "I know he was involved because I saw him there." Dennis is also quoted as saying that he and the pediatrician were pretty good friends, and after the pediatrician left the military, he, the pediatrician, set up a practice in Farmington, New Mexico. "I used to go fishing all the time up north, and I visited him several times up there and was involved," and has said, "I don't remember his name. I think he is still practicing in Farmington." A review of personnel files and interviews with former members of the Roswell Air Force Walker Air Force Base Hospital staff revealed that only one physician ever relocated to Farmington, New Mexico following his military service. The former Captain Frank B. Nordstrom served at Walker Air Force Base from June 1951 until June 1953. Records also revealed that Nordstrom was indeed a pediatrician, and while at Walker Air Force Base, served as a chief of pediatric services. When Nordstrom, a resident of the small town of Aztec, New Mexico, was interviewed for this report, he stated he did not recall ever meeting Dennis and could not recall any events that supported any of his claims. See signed sworn statement Appendix B. Farmington, population 8,000 in 1954, is located in the primarily rural Four Corners region of New Mexico, approximately 300 miles northwest of Roswell. According to Nordstrom, Farmington did not have a pediatrician before his arrival in 1954. From 1954 until approximately 1970, Nordstrom believes he was the only pediatrician in the area. His recollections were confirmed by a local Farmington pharmacist, Charles Clothier. Clothier also served at the Walker Air Force Hospital from 55 to 57, and following his military service returned to Farmington, his hometown, where he lived since 1934. Clothier had been employed by and co-owned a business, Farmington Drugs, since 1957. He is familiar with most, if not all, the doctors who practice in Farmington and the Four Corners regions of New Mexico. Clothier's confirmation that Nordstrom was the first pediatrician to practice in Farmington area was based on both his frequent professional contacts with local physicians and his experiences as a longtime Farmington resident. Although Nordstrom believed that he was the pediatrician described, he was at a loss to explain how Dennis gained information concerning his military and civilian employment history. In a signed sworn statement, Nordstrom stated that he did not recall ever meeting Dennis and had certainly never been visited by Dennis as he had claimed. One possible source of the information is that from approximately 1958 until approximately 1961, Dennis operated a drugstore in Aztec, New Mexico, a small town near Farmington where Nordstrom resides. Interestingly, Aztec is the location of the original crashed flying saucer story see below. However, Nordstrom also did not recall any contact with Dennis in the capacity as a drugstore operator. Now we have this article, we'll read this one. It says, Behind the Roswell Incident. The Roswell Incident story is hardly original. In 1948, a work of fiction reportedly appeared in the Aztec, New Mexico Independent Review describing the crash of a flying saucer with little men near Aztec, New Mexico. In 1950, Frank Scully, a columnist for the theatrical publication Variety, published a book, Behind the Flying Saucers, which proclaimed the story to be true. Based on the Aztec story, Behind the Flying Saucers bears many similarities to the Roswell incident, most notably descriptions of covert flying saucer and little men. Recoveries interspersed with doses of unsubstantiated accusations directed at the U.S. Air Force. In his book, Scully claimed he had information from two scientists, Silas M. Newton and a mysterious Dr. G, who he claimed investigated the crash for the government. In reality, Newton and G were con men who convinced Scully of the story's authenticity. Intrigued by the sensational claims made in Behind the Flying Saucer, a reporter from San Francisco Chronicle, J.P. Kahn, decided to look into the matter. What resulted from Kahn's research were articles in the September 1952 and August 1956 edition of True magazine, which determined that the story was a phony as a headwaiter's bow and tie and smile. Kahn, with the assistance of a magician, devised a plan to sting the two con men. To execute the sting, he used sleight of hand, switching an inscrutable metal disc claimed to be from a flying saucer with a slug of his own manufacture. After the switch, Kahn submitted the disc to a laboratory for analysis, revealing that they were of earthly origin, in particular a grade of aluminum used to manufacture pots and pans. Even with the exposure of this obvious fraud, the Aztec story is still revered by UFO theorists. Elements of this story occasionally reemerge and are thought to be a catalyst for other crash flying saucer stories, including the Roswell incident. My goodness. Well, let's stop there for the day. We're up to the part that says descriptions of other Air Force members. Well, actually, let me see. We'll read a couple more pages because that'll put us into section 2.2. So we'll stop at a better stopping point. We have time. Descriptions of other Air Force members. Since official records proof that none of the nurses at the Roswell Air Force Base in July 47 were missing, and the nurse and pediatrician described in this account had been identified, major discrepancies between Dennis's recollection and official records were apparent. In an effort to provide for the fullest possible accounting of these claims, even though key aspects had already been proven false, Air Force researchers sought additional information to determine if there was validity to any portion of the account. Since the witness had never provided documentation to support his claims, the only source of additional information was the numerous interviews he had previously provided to private researchers and the media. His many statements, which have appeared in newspapers, videos, magazines, movies, books, lectures, journals, and television programs, were reviewed for information that might further explain his testimony. Examination of this large body of publicly available information immediately provided clues that the witness may have recalled incidents from a period other than July 1947. The first clue is that he repeatedly, in all of the interviews, referred to the injured military person he allegedly transported to the Roswell Air Force Hospital as an airman. The rank of airman was not in existence in 1947. It was implemented on April the 1st, 1952. Prior to that date, an airman in the Air Force was referred to by the U.S. Army equivalent, a private. Another possible indication that he recalled events from a different time was the description of an alleged black sergeant that accompanied the red-headed officer at the hospital. The pairing of a white officer with a black NCO seemed unlikely since in 1947, the U.S. Army Air Forces was racially segregated, as were all branches of the U.S. Armed Forces. The U.S. Air Force did not begin racial integration until May the 11th, 1949. An issuance of the Air Force Letter 35-3 that formally ended segregation. Though it is not possible in 1947 for a black NCO to accompany and seem to be working with a white officer, it would be unlikely. These two discrepancies did not provide a firm time frame of actual events if they occurred at all. To approximate a time frame for actual events, the specific details of the information provided were examined. This examination was to determine if the military members were identified by name or by a combination of any other distinguishing characteristics such as rank, position, age, or physical attributes. If the testimony identified a military member as having been present for an event, then the personnel record could be used to affix an approximate date. Affixing a date of an event by referencing personnel records was possible since each military member personnel file contained a physical description and a chronological listing of duty stations, units of assignment, a work assignment, and for his or her entire military career. This detailed examination revealed several likely references to specific individuals which through their personnel files were documented as having been assigned to the hospital at Roswell or Walker Air Force bases. Roswell renamed Walker Air Force after January 1948. The big red-headed colonel. An indication that Dennis might have mistaken the date of actual events was that he was quoted in at least one book as having said that the officer who threatened him in the hospital was a big red-headed colonel. Research revealed that only one tall colonel with red hair was known to have been assigned to the Walker Air Force Hospital. Colonel Lee Farrell was the hospital commander from October 1954 until June 1960. Farrell was 6'1" and had red hair. Captain Slats Wilson In at least 2 interviews, Dennis repeatedly made reference to a nurse named Captain Wilson. He recalled that Captain Wilson, who he believed was the head nurse, was another nurse stationed at the Roswell Air Force Hospital in July 1947. Dennis claims he spoke to Captain Wilson several times in reference to the alleged missing nurse. He claims that on the day after he met with the missing nurse at the Roswell Air Force Officers Club, he attempted to contact her by telephone at the hospital, but was told that she wasn't on duty. Instead, he spoke with Captain Wilson. I called the station I knew she, the missing nurse, always worked at, Dennis said. She was a general nurse. I was informed that she wasn't working that day. Dennis then telephoned an old girl by the name of Wilson, Captain Wilson. I asked her, what happened? She said, Glenn, I don't know what happened. She's not on duty. She said she'd try to get word to her, the missing nurse, that you, Dennis, want to talk to her. Later in the same interview, Dennis further described Wilson. We called her Slats Wilson, who was a big, tall nurse, about 6'2" or 3, big, tall, skinny gal. And we called her Slats. Everybody called her Slats. She, the one who told me she heard there was a plane crash and the nurse went down on a training mission. The testimony appeared to clearly identify by name, rank, position, physical attributes, and by a distinctive nickname, Slats, another nurse present at the hospital in July of 1947. But a review of the morning reports of the Roswell Air Force Hospital for July 1947 did not contain the name of a nurse or anyone else named Wilson. The only female captain assigned to Roswell Air Force Hospital in July of 1947 was the chief nurse captain, Joyce Goddard. Goddard, who was 5 feet 6 inches tall, was transferred from Roswell to Korea on August 21, 1947. Therefore, according to Dennis's recollection of events, this review of the morning reports indicated that there were 2 missing nurses, not one, Lieutenant Naomi Self and Captain Slats Wilson. Further scrutiny of personnel records and individual assigned to the Roswell Air Force Walker Air Force Hospital indicated that Dennis's recollections of events were apparently inaccurate. Examination of the August 1947 morning reports did not list a nurse named Wilson, but they did list a nurse named Slattery. Captain Lucille Slattery, who retired as Lieutenant Colonel and is now deceased, was reassigned from Fort George Wright, Washington to Roswell on August the 7th, 1947. Slattery replaced Goddard as chief nurse and was the only female captain assigned to the Roswell Air Force Hospital. Interviews of persons with longtime professional and personal associations with Slattery revealed that she was known by the unusual nickname Slats. Additionally, former associates of Slattery interviewed for this report recalled that she was the only Air Force nurse that had ever been known as Slats. Persons interviewed were Air Force nurses who retired in the 1960s. Good morning. Good to see you. Konnichiwa. Each with more than 20 years of service, including retired Air Force Colonel Ethel Kovac Scott, who served as chief nurse of the Air Force from 63 to 65. Upon review of Slattery's personnel file, it was learned that she was only 5 feet and 3 inches tall, and therefore most likely not the 6'2" or 6'3" tall, skinny nurse described. This discrepancy in physical description and the fact that she did not arrive at Roswell until nearly 1 month after Dennis claims he spoke to her led to the conclusion that perhaps he confused Slattery with some other tall, thin nurse, possibly named Wilson, who was stationed at the Roswell Air Force or Walker Air Force Base Hospital at some other time. Consequently, a comprehensive review of the morning reports and rosters at Roswell and Walker Hospital revealed that only one nurse named Wilson had ever served there, and she did not arrive until February of 1956. Captain Idabelle Miller, who became Major Idabelle Wilson in 1958 due to marriage and a promotion, was assigned to the Walker Air Force Hospital from February 56 until May 1960. Upon review of Major Wilson's personnel file, it was learned that she was 5 feet 9 inches tall and thin. Also, she served as the head nurse of the surgical ward at Walker Air Force Hospital. Therefore, Wilson's physical attributes, tall and thin, and position as head nurse matches Dennis's recollections of tall and thin and position as a head nurse. When contacted by Air Force researchers, Wilson stated she had no recollection of Dennis or ever having conversations with him. Any of the events he described or of a nurse was missing. She also made it abundantly clear that as an Air Force officer and medical professional, she would not spread a rumor of a plane crash as Dennis alleged Captain Wilson did in conversations with him. Results of missing nurse and pediatrician research. Examination of the missing nurse and the pediatrician stories and other facts established by research provided a foundation for further analysis to determine what actual events, if any, were responsible for these claims. Based on information developed, it appears that the witness may be mistaken in some of his statements, especially regarding the time frame of these events. The following facts have been established. A, the only physician who ever relocated to Farmington, New Mexico following his military service at Roswell Walker Air Force Base was the former chief of pediatric services at Walker Air Force Base Hospital, the former Captain Frank B. Nordstrom. Further, he did not arrive at Walker Air Force Base until June of 1951, 4 years after the purported Roswell incident. Has no recollection of Dennis, the statements Dennis attributes to him, or any actual events that explain his account. The only nurse ever assigned to the Roswell Air Force Hospital, subsequently renamed Walker, named Wilson, was Ida Bell Wilson. She served at the Walker Air Force Hospital from 56 until 60 and had no recollection of ever meeting or speaking with Dennis or any of the activities he described. C. Captain Lucille Slattery, the only Air Force nurse ever known by the distinctive nickname Slats, was stationed at the Roswell Air Force Hospital. However, she did not arrive until August the 7th, 1947. This was 1 month after the Roswell incident, making it improbable that Dennis spoke with her in early July of 1947. There is no record that a nurse named Naomi Maria Self was ever assigned to Roswell Air Force Base, Walker Air Force, or was ever a member of the U.S. military. All nurses assigned to the Roswell Air Force Hospital in July of 1947 had been accounted for, thereby eliminating any possibility that there was ever a missing nurse. Since actual Air Force members who served at Roswell and Walker Air Force hospitals were described in this account, the next step was to determine if actual events that occurred at the hospital were possibly the source of this story. As stated earlier in this report, a thorough examination of both classified and unclassified records from 1947 revealed no Army, Air Forces, or U.S. Air Force activities that explain the alleged events. Therefore, records were reviewed from other time periods based on personnel records of individuals believed to have been identified. These persons and the periods when they were assigned to Roswell Walker Air Force Base are listed in Table 2.1. The research profile. With the establishment of a possible time frame, research efforts paralleled the previous examination in Section 1 of this report that determined high-altitude balloons with anthropomorphic dummy payloads were responsible for the reports of aliens at the 2 rural New Mexico crash saucer locations. A further review of Air Force activities was then made to determine if any were significantly similar to the information provided. Based on the time period established by personnel records and statements contained in the witness's own account, the following profile of possible events was established. An event involving the Walker Air Force Base Hospital that took place between 1947 and 1960. A. That may have resulted in very mangled black little bodies that had a strong odor being placed in body bags. B. that may have resulted in 2 persons not normally assigned to the hospital, believed to be doctors that were supposedly doing preliminary autopsies on the little bodies. C, that may have involved a body with a head that was much larger than normal, which was transported to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. D, that may have involved a red-headed captain or a big red-headed colonel. E, that may have resulted in an ambulance parked in the rear of the hospital containing wreckage with inscriptions that were bluish purplish, which looked kind of like the bottom of a canoe. And yes, oh good, yes, that's good. F, that may have required a heightened state of security. Wow, okay, so we will stop there for today. We're up to section 2.2, aircraft accidents. Wow, this is just so crazy, isn't it? To see things about aliens and if it's true or not. I guess, I mean, they say it was balloons. I don't know. And this is it. The Roswell Report. Let me know what you think about the Roswell Report. Do you believe in aliens? I've never seen one. I don't know. I've met people that have seen aliens. I believe them. I don't think they're lying. But I myself have never seen an alien, not that I know of. I've seen drones here lately that fly awfully close to my building. What can you do? This is my shout out, is my banana. Hello, hello. Can you hear me? And this is my product placement, is my peanut butter. And I bought it because it comes in a glass jar. I eat a lot of peanut butter, so this will definitely go to use. If you cut me open, peanut butter will ooze out. And I like this glass jar. I needed a glass jar, so I bought it. So I could have a proper glass jar. I needed a glass jar. So I hope you have a wonderful day. It's Thursday here in the East Coast of the United States. And let me know you were here so I'll visit your channel and watch your videos and subscribe to your channel, because I like to watch for watch and sub for sub. That's how I grow my channel. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Give me a kiss. I hope you have a good day. Talk to you later. Probably Saturday.